Okay, well, welcome. And welcome to those who are watching later on. My classes, I said I would record this and post it later. So I'd like to make 3 points. And at any point, if you have something you'd like to share, offer, or ask a question about, by all means. First is, I am so grateful to live where we do. Now, I'm going to be showing videos throughout this presentation. And I have a YouTube channel, for those of you who aren't aware, at Dr. Jan 41, DRJAHN 41. And so I'd like to start off with a playlist that I have there of all of the places in and around Orange County and around Middletown where one can go. So for example, Bear Mountain State Park. It's a cool state park, and it gets more visitors per year than Yosemite does. And so just when we think about how Orange County is introducing people to, wild spaces and wildlife, this is really significant. And our, being an hour away from New York City clearly helps with that. So I have a list of a number of places where I like to go here. There's directions, I put them on a map, and some, things about each that you're going to see. Orange County obviously has these 2 great rivers on either side of us. There's the Hudson east and the Delaware River west. So, I have some information here. And then some smaller streams like the Wallkill, which is a wonderful place to visit. I've kayaked it, although it's a little harder. It actually flows south to north, which is unusual for rivers to do that. But so Orange County has 2 nice rivers on either side of it, and then the Wallkill going straight up the middle. And if you were to kayak on the Wallkill here, you would be seeing scenes like this. One of my students said that once they discovered a mastodon skeleton, or at least a tusk of one, and they began excavation, because if you look at the sides of the Wallkill here, that's our former geologist, Larry O'Brien, this was laid down as the glaciers were receding. All right, and so Orange County was covered by ice 13,000 years ago. But then as it receded, then this black dirt, which we have here, and where so much agriculture is in the south of the county. I missed my mastodon skeleton. There's a mastodon here, this is where sugar was found, the mastodon, which is on display in the biotech building. So clearly there's great history here. We're surrounded by areas of different elevations. So the Shawangunk Ridge Trail is just a little to our north. So just beautiful as it looks over the Hudson Valley. So just absolutely great hiking here. One of the things I like to always stress is it's a lot harder to get out. Hey, welcome. As always, as I go through, if there's any questions or things you want to share, by all means, feel free to do that. This is a wonderful place to hike in warm weather, but also cold weather. I mean, that's one of the things, if you don't mind my just try to, preaching just a tiny bit. One of the great things that I learned was that I used to just stop going out and observing wildlife when it was cold. And I would just wait and say, oh, like when the weather gets warmer, I'll get out. But I don't do that for 2 reasons. One, and this is part of the lecture for today, because you miss so much stuff that only happens at this time of year. So not only is it a good time of year to see certain things, but also this is the only time of year to see certain things. And then also, just as someone who skis, I got angry with myself because I realized I know how to ski and I know how to dress for skiing. You just wear certain clothes. And then I would stop hiking just because, oh, it's too cold. And there's a saying that I like a great deal, where there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing options. So that if you know how to dress for, skiing or whatever, that, you can just see beautiful, trails. They certainly look different in winter than they do in summer. Now, one last thing before I focus on the types of wildlife for today. We have so many trails. We have the Shawangunk Ridge Trail. We have the Liberty Loop Trail, which includes part of the Appalachian Trail. The Appalachian Trail passes through Orange County and is adjacent to us. So when it comes to hiking, we have old railroads like the Heritage Trail lying over an old railroad bed. We have old canal beds. Here's part of the Appalachian Trail. So there's just so much that we have in Orange County to take advantage of. And just to say this, because I get out and about as often as I can, and I notice, especially in summer, you'll see groups of people kayaking on the Delaware or staying at this campground. And you become aware that a lot of these people have saved up their money over the course of the year so that in the warmer months, they can go to camp in Orange County, that they can spend a night at the cabin in Bear Mountain, that people save so that they can come and experience the beauty that we have in Orange County. And so we who live here, it's such a privilege to be able to see this. So I do have this one playlist just titled Wild Spaces in and around Orange County, New York, with just some of the places that you can go and hike and some of the things that you might see. The two that I think I'm going to focus on most are the Liberty Loop Trail, which is just a great place for birds. We're a little late for this bird here. This is a short-eared owl. There are a couple of birds that you have to go looking for in winter. That's the time to see them because during the warmer months, they are in Canada. They are north of us and we are their winter grounds. But once again, that was something that took me a long time to appreciate. I always said, I'm going to wait for the warmer weather and that's when I'll go out seeing wildlife. Not aware that, some of the things that I would have liked to have seen, like rough-legged hawks or short-eared owls, that winter is the only time that we can see them in our area. This area, they do manage the water levels, but when the water is high, this one and the next place I'm going to show you are the two best places to see waterfowl. So this is on the southern border of Orange County next to Unionville. So if you just go down towards Westtown and Unionville, right before you hit the Jersey border, you see this and you can see, here's another bird that would only visit us in winter, the snow goose. This is just a great place to see the migrating ducks, which I am about to mention. My second favorite place would be the Bashakill, which is 20 minutes from here. If you just go past Otisville, there's a place that has both the remains of the old railroad and the D&H Canal. So the old canal is on one side of this wetland, the old railroad is on the other. So you've got hiking trails on both sides of this, and it's just a wonderful place to go, and see all types of wildlife. I would like to just maybe introduce you to two different groups, because this is the time of year for these two, with the idea that, I could give another talk later on some of the later groups. This is the time for ducks, all right? They have spent their summers south of here, and now they are going to start migrating through as the ice melts, which is just starting to do. So this is the Liberty Loop, and just notice that you just go out and see hundreds and hundreds of ducks on a good day. And in a couple of weeks, you won't see this because they will then be far north of us. Now, I'm excited because I like to go and see these, but also I'm excited because Orange County is so valuable to them. If we did not preserve our wetlands, then Canada would have fewer ducks, because these ducks, they rely on 3 habitats. I mean, we're used to one, like I have my house and we have the white-tailed deer, like they live here, we get that. But a lot of birds, they have 3 different habitats that they rely on, wherever they spend their summers, wherever they spend their winters, and then the spaces in between. Now, there are ducks which will spend their summers here. Canada geese, in fact, they spend all year. Wood ducks, we'll get back to them, they can spend all year. But then there's a lot of ducks which don't live here in summer or winter, but which require Orange County as part of their migration route. If you don't see them in the next couple of weeks, then you won't see them until the fall when they come back through. So they don't spend summers here and they don't spend winters here, but they do pass through. And this was, once again, it took me a while to appreciate that. Like, this is a beautiful bird, the hooded merganser. All right. And if you want to see it, all right, starting like maybe right now, and then for the next like 3 weeks, maybe a month, that's your window. If you don't get out, then if you say, I'm going to wait for it to get a little warmer, and then I'll go out looking for birds, you will not see these because they will not be back in Orange County until the fall when they're coming south. So not only is it a pleasure to go out and see these migrating birds, it also reinforces just how important Orange County is. All right, the areas north of us, they wouldn't get these birds unless we had wetlands and we had, habitat suitable for them to rest up on their journey. They might spend a couple of days before flying off again, during which time they're going to feed as much as they can on algae and plant roots and any invertebrates that they can find. Okay, so what might you see? Well, let me just quickly run through these and then we'll get to salamanders because we're almost at their best time. I really regret that in the fall I was in a kayak. When I'm in my kayak, I tend not to take my back camera, just for obvious reasons. And I missed the other swan, which I feel bad about. So these are beautiful birds. But this mute swan is not native to our area. It was introduced from Europe. And these are the swans you tend to see. We do have a native swan that has a longer neck and a black bill called a trumpeter swan. And there was a beautiful one that took off in front of me and I would have had a great video, but I apologize. I didn't have my camera with me at the time. Ooh, sorry. Okay, sorry. So if you go out now, you'll see these swans. On the Bashik Hill, I think I saw a group of about 10 of them 2 days ago. So once again, the ice is starting to melt. And so these are just beautiful, beautiful birds. Some will stay with us all year round, some are migrating. And you can tell that they have this orange bill. And if you saw one with a completely black bill and a longer neck, that's actually rather special. During this migration time, we would get some of the trumpeter swans. This would be the only time of the year you have any chance to see them. So that is a goose. Geese tend to be a little bit bigger than ducks. And one of the things, I know it's easy not to appreciate geese, but there are certainly plants that eat, there are certainly birds that eat fruit, like, parrots eat fruit. But what birds eat, say, grass? And just leaves, like you name a bird that eats leaves? There aren't many because you need too much intestine. If you're going to be a vegetarian, all right, you need more intestines. And for a bird, that's just hard because then it's hard to fly. So the Canada geese, when you see them like on the lawn, I know it's easy not to appreciate Canada geese, but when you see them, in a grassy area nibbling on grass, keep in mind most birds can't do that. So geese, that they are eating more leaves than almost any other bird, unless we want to talk about rheas or ostriches and the like. And so geese are kind of special, and that's why they can get so big. You can get energy if you're eating leaves. Then the downside is birds can only be so big before they have trouble flying. So, we have swans, we have Canada geese. There are snow geese, which migrate, which spend their winters here sometimes, maybe once out of every 3 years. All right, you can't always depend on seeing snow geese here. It was maybe 10 years ago that there was a whole bunch that was hanging out on the Carmelite Lake about 5 minutes from here. Okay, and on very rare occasions, right around now, you can see a goose called a brant. Usually they're on the Hudson or they're a little closer to the ocean. They tend to like more salt water. It looks like a little Canada goose. And here you can see it among some Canada geese, but that's another goose called a brant. Once again, if you're going to see a brant, this is the only time of year to do that. So Orange County gets geese, and we also get ducks. Now, I'd like to split the ducks into two groups. So if you look at these ducks, look at what they're doing. They are staying above the water. And to eat, all they do is they stick their head underwater. They don't completely submerge. These are what we call the dabbling ducks. And that's different from the diving ducks, which we'll see in just a second. So dabbling ducks, they stay on the surface, and they're perhaps the ones that you are most familiar with. Now, there are differences between males and females. And if you wonder, here's something which sounds really odd what I'm about to say. But let's say, I don't know, you were interested in finding a partner or meeting someone. If you were, say, at a biology after party after one of your biology classes, and there was someone you thought was attractive and you thought of approaching them, has anyone ever stopped and said, wait a minute, I have to make sure that this is a member of my species? Anybody? Probably not, because there's only one species of human alive today. There used to be a bunch. Now there's only one. So if you see someone who looks human, they are. Ducks have a very different problem, because right now is the time of year where they want to mate. But on a lake, you can have a dozen different species. So for ducks who want to mate, on any given lake, there's a lot of wrong choices, where if they mate, they're going to be wasting their reproductive energy. Like the eggs won't hatch, or the young would not thrive. And so therefore, they need signals so that they can find out who's in my group, who should I reproduce with. And that's why so many of the males have these striking colorations. So the females know who to choose. The females know this male is a mallard, one of my group, because of the green head and this coloration here. So as we'll see a lot of the different coloration differences, that's what they're for. And notice that the females tend not to be brightly colored, all right? Because while very often both ducks, male and female, will help take care of the young, very often the females do a little more. And so she may be hiding in the rushes with the young after they hatch. And very often, while some birds will lose feathers a little at a time, hey, I'm going to lose a feather today, and I'll lose a feather tomorrow, and I'll just slowly grow back. Ducks do it all at once. So there's a time where they can't fly, and that coincides with when they have young. So the young can't fly, so they're going to stick with their young and swim around with them, because flying is no longer an option. They're molting in new feathers. So she's just going to kind of hang out and hide. All right, whereas he is brightly colored, once again, because he wants her to know that he is in her group, that if she is looking for a partner, he's different from the mallard. All right, so each of these then has a striking, or a way to distinguish, and many of the coloration patterns are rather striking. So these are wood ducks. Wood ducks will stay with us all year round. The males look like that, but only this time of year. So if you see wood ducks in the summer or in the fall, they'll look really nice, but they won't look this nice, right? The males have this really bright coloration. So here's a more typical summer pattern. So these could be males, females, juveniles. Notice they're not striking when they're not trying to attract a mate, because otherwise they're just exposing themselves to predators. All right. So this is also a dabbling duck. One of my favorite ducks is one you'd have to see now, all right? Or by now, I mean probably a week from now, starting, and then maybe for another 2 weeks after that. They're called pintails, and I think you can see the reason why. They have these long tail feathers, all right, that kind of, are up like a pin. Now notice this is a dabbling duck. It's not diving underneath the water. It's staying at the surface and just kind of submerging its head, all right? So these are dabbling ducks. They have brown heads, a bluish bill, and once again, males have these very striking elongated tail feathers. All right, when they come through, they can come through in big groups, and so you might see very large flocks of pintails at near a body of water. And once again, so there's a male and a female. Notice the female a little bit less striking, and she didn't have the long feathers. This is the time of year because they are Canada's ducks, all right? And so they're just passing through yet farther north from us. They will not spend their summers here. And the same is true, at least almost entirely. Every now and then one of them hangs around. These are called black ducks, all right? Because They are typically darker in color, and they don't really have that much in the way of any bright coloration. Here, once again, notice they're a dabbling duck, just reaching their bill down, and notice that one just like it looked like a clam or a freshwater mussel that they were able to get. So those wide duck bills are grabbing plants, plant roots, algae, invertebrates, things like that in order to eat. Here's another one, which we won't see for longer. It's not going to be here just yet, like maybe a couple of weeks from now. It's called a green-winged teal. They have a nice reddish head with a green stripe on it, the little green bar on their on the wings. Once again, migrating through. We won't see this much longer. And then there's another dabbling duck here called a widgeon. All right, we'll only see those. You can see the cream area on, oops, sorry, one more. And then one that has a really big bill is called a shoveler, hence the name. So look at how big that bill is. Once again, here's a dabbling duck that's just passing through. So if you like to see ducks and you were to go to the Bashakil and hike along with a pair of binoculars or go to the Liberty Loop, you're going to see ducks that you won't see again until fall when they come back through. And in fall, their coloration often isn't as bright. So this is the best time of the year to see these ducks. And then there's a second group called the diving ducks. Watch these ducks. They're going to do something that you haven't seen yet. They go completely underwater as they swim after fish, invertebrates, or maybe to get plant roots, et cetera, which are deeper down. These are called the ring-necked ducks. And I know that's weird because obviously they have an obvious ring on the bill, but if you look really close, if you look at this neck, you'll see it's brown. So if you get really close to it, it's obvious it doesn't have a ring on its neck, but you have to be super close. So the ring on the bill is probably the most obvious. These come through early. So in this migration season, if you were to say, oh, the ducks are starting to come through, you'd probably see these coming through in big groups. And then, like, for example, the teal, the one that had the cinnamon head, they're a couple weeks away. So, they don't all fly at the exact same moment. These hang out in big groups. And so a great place to see these about 10 minutes away at 6.5 mile, 6.5 station road, which is on the way to Goshen. That's a great place to see these ring-necked ducks. Here's a little diving duck called a bufflehead. The males have this big white spot, the females slightly smaller. But you'll notice that they, once again, are diving under the water to look for, aquatic invertebrates and the like. All right, so once again, this is not with us all summer long. And then the same could be said of something that kind of looks like them, which is called a golden eye. Golden eye, they have yellow eyes. They have a white spot on their faces, the males, the females don't. But these are also then diving ducks. Okay, here's a ruddy duck. It is a diving duck. Its tail feathers kind of stick up at an angle, as you can see. There are some which would be very rarely seen, like this one. I saw this one a number of years ago, about 20 minutes from here. Big reddish head. They tend to like salt water more. So if you were closer to the Hudson or in Jersey, you'd be more likely to see a canvas back than you are here. And then there's a smaller version of this, a lousy picture, but that was the best picture I could get this day. It's called a redhead. So there are two ducks with red heads that you can see on rare occasions. Finally, among the ducks, two have very narrow bills and are called mergansers. This one can actually stay with us all winter. So you might have actually seen them this winter if you had gone out. You'll probably see a lot here, like some of them are migrating through, but they might stay all summer as well. And the males have this nice white coloration. The females tend to have, tufts of feathers on their head, which are kind of a reddish brown color. This is the common merganser, males and females. And then the final type of merganser is this hooded merganser. Once again, notice a very narrow bill, so they can, catch small fish. The bigger your bill, the harder it is to close it quickly. And you're trying to catch a swimming, critter, a fish or an invertebrate, that would make it difficult. A big bill would probably help you with mussels and plant roots more. But these are diving ducks that are swimming after small fish, aquatic invertebrates. And notice this hooded merganser has the males have a black head with a nice big spot on them. All right. So Orange County has great ducks which stay all summer, but there's a longer list of ducks which only pass through during the spring migration and the fall migration. The spring migration is when they have the brighter colors. So if you were interested, you wanted to go for a hike. If you went for a hike, say at the Bashakill along an old railroad bed or an old canal bed, nice and flat. But if you bring a pair of binoculars, you're likely to see ducks as well. The Heritage Trail used to just be dirt as it went to the 6.5 station road, but it's now paved up to that point. That's a great place, about 10 minutes from here if you wanted to see ducks as well. If you were interested in getting out, here's something cool that you could see. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the cool amphibians you could see, unless anyone had any duck questions. Okay, so somewhere I have just frog in general. Forgive me, I have so many videos that sometimes finding the one that I just decided this is the one I must start off with. All right, well, we'll start here. So there are certainly aspects of amphibians which we are, which you need to wait a little bit for. So, bullfrogs and green frogs, if you wanted to say, oh, I want to hear them make their calls. So for example, let's just listen to the bullfrog calls. In a second. There's a bullfrog going. Okay, so those are calls that you can hear, throughout spring, early summer bullfrogs throughout the summer. So clearly, those are things on the frogs we can wait on. However, I just want to point out, if you ask the question, wow, why did that bullfrog let you get so close to it to take the picture? That's because I took a picture of it like now, like not now, but maybe like 3 weeks from now. In that, something for all of the amphibians, really big on the salamanders, but let me just start with frogs, if that's okay. They spent their winter somewhere, buried in soil, etc. But they want to go to water. Like bullfrogs are going to spend all summer in water, but salamanders, they want to, go from the woods where they are, go to the pond to have sex, lay their eggs, and then go back to the woods. So there is a narrow window of time where amphibians go from their winter places to the wetlands where they're going to spend their summers. And they try to do it before the birds come back, right? Because if you come back before the birds come back, well, hey, that's fewer things trying to eat you. And also, if you can lay your eggs in water, one of the cool things about this time of year is the snow just melted. So there are temporary pools called vernal pools. Vernal pools, they're cool because they don't have fish. If you lay your eggs in a place where there's fish, like a regular old lake or a river, well, your kids are going to get eaten, most of them. But if you can find this temporary pool that's only there in early spring as the snow melts, you lay your eggs, your tadpoles or your larvae develop into adults, you're going to have much more of them be successful. So this is a time of year that if you go out at night, and so I'm going to just repeat this a bunch of times, you watch for the first warm, rainy night of spring. Maybe it's at the end of March, maybe it's the first week of April. But if you watch and say, oh, the temperatures are pretty good, it's been raining all day. That is the night to put on a raincoat and to go out on a road near a river or a lake, because that's where you will see so many of these amphibians. And they'll be exhausted because they're hopping, then they have to stop and rest. hop, 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 stop, and earth. And so the reason I got right next to this bullfrog, it was kind of sluggish because it was still cold. It was exhausted from all the hopping. You can really get to see the wildlife. Now, there are different species of frog, and a couple of them, sorry, we'll get back to you. There are some that are active first, either calls first. So wood frogs would be among them. Wood frogs, they're kind of camouflaged, to let them, blend in with leaves. They're actually the only amphibian, as far as I know, to occur north of the Arctic Circle, because they're actually resistant to freezing. You can freeze a wood frog and it survives. Now, I have never done this because it's just something in me. I just feels a little cruel. But apparently it doesn't hurt the frog. You can catch a wood frog, put it in the freezer, freeze it solid, and thaw it out, and then it hops away. All right. So they have adapted to colder temperatures. And so if you were to go, they're among the first ones to call. So notice the leaves aren't out yet. The ones that sound like maybe pulling your finger along a balloon, like a, those are the wood frogs calling. And once again, they're seeking out vernal pools. Early spring. So if you were to go to the Bashakil, here's a place that it's going to dry out. All right, this is just the snow melted. It's not connected to the river, and there's no fish there. And when you go, there's frogs everywhere, because what they want to do is have sex, lay their eggs, have all of their tadpoles develop in an area that has no fish that would eat them. And the tadpoles will become frogs by before the pond dries out, or at least that is the hope. So once again, we're in that time of year, the first warm, rainy spring night. It could be next week or the week after that. That'll be when they all go to these vernal pools, start making the calls. The frogs will stay there for a week, or so, and mate, lay all of their eggs. And so when you go there, look at how many frogs, just on the surface there. They're, they're mating, they're calling. All right, so you just see lots of those. And then what they're doing is then they will obviously lay their eggs. And so if you were to come back to that same pond, you would just see eggs everywhere. All right, because that's what they want to do. That, the couple of nights right after the rain, they go to a, whatever vernal pool is, they lay just masses and masses of eggs, once again, in a place where there won't be any fish to eat them. Wood frog eggs, one of the things I think are super cool about them is because they actually develop a symbiotic relationship with little microbes. So if you were to look inside these eggs, so look under a microscope, you can see all these little things swimming around. This is a wood frog egg, but there's obviously green algae and protists inside the egg stuff. And notice it turns green because there's a symbiotic relationship where the algae of the pond will live off the carbon dioxide that the baby tadpoles are producing, but then the algae produce the oxygen that the tadpoles use. So that's cool, kind of cool. So wood frogs, they are among the first to mate. So if you don't go out when it's still cold, you're not going to hear their mating songs. And then the same applies with one of the two smallest frogs that we have in our area, the spring peeper. This is a tree frog. Most tree frogs live in trees. Spring peepers don't. Okay. And then they make this peep sound, as you can hear. Now, once again, it is only males which make these sounds. All right. So males are making the wood frog sound, the spring peeper sound, so that the females know where to find them if they are interested in mating. So once again, it's dark out. And so if you want to find a partner in the dark, one of them should make noise. And the reason it's the males is because the good thing about making this call is if the females want to mate, they know where to find you. The bad thing is if anything eats frogs, they know where to find you. So a lot of these males are going to end up dead, all right, because in trying to attract a partner and making a spectacle of yourself, raccoons and herons and everything else can find you. Some of the calls involve a bit more of a trill. So this one has a slight variation. You'll hear it in a second. Anything. Okay. So that's a little variation on. So these are the frogs of early spring that you are likely to hear. So the wood frogs and the spring peepers, they come first. And then a little bit later will be the gray tree frog. All right, so this is more of a, in April, you'll hear these gray tree frogs, and they sound like this. And then you start getting into the more summer frogs, like the tree frog, the green frogs and the bullfrogs, which can mate all summer. So once again, that's a neat thing with, the frogs that, if you want to hear them, each make period of time, say after the first form, each make very distinctive sounds. So this is, once again, a little bit later after a rain. Here you see all of the toads all mating in the water. And you're thinking, well, don't toads live on land? Yeah, except when they want to mate and lay their eggs. So right after, this rain, there's just a couple of days where all the toads in the area are going to go to the pond, mate, lay their eggs, and they go back hopping on land. And if you listen, toads then have their distinctive song. As a way of overwhelming potential predators. Somewhere I have the toad song. Oh, I thought it was there.
Although the late Devonian are small.
Anyway, somewhere I have a toad song somewhere. There we go. So once again, each of these would make a different song for the same reason that the ducks had different coloration patterns. So the female toads know that this is one of their males, as opposed to a tree frog or a peeper, which would sound different. So not only do we have frogs as amphibians in this area, but then we also have salamanders. Now, here's, obviously as the snow melts, you can get like all of this rain, the Bashakil. Here, this is a road that's actually flooded. But you can see that, salamanders are choosing this time to go back to aquatic environments. So here, they're almost migrating upstream here because they want to lay their eggs. And while there are variation with salamanders, a lot of the young salamanders, they have these external gills and are obviously aquatic. Now, lots of salamanders can be seen crossing roads after the first rainy night in spring. But the one we want to focus on the most is this spotted salamander. It's big and fat because it's in this family called the Ambistomidae. They're the big fat salamanders, the mole salamanders, and that's different from most of the salamanders that you find in our area. You're not going to see this one most of the year because they're called mole salamanders for a year. They burrow. They're deep underground where they look for worms and stuff like that. And so if you want to see this, the first warm spring night, that's kind of your time. And you will see so many of these. So something I've done for years, lots of people do, is you go to like the Bashakil or a river near you with the idea that you're going to walk along the road and pick up the spotted salamanders on one side of the road and help them cross so they don't get hit by a car. And if you drive down the road, it's hard because you have to go like this, and then like this, and then like this, because you just see all of these salamanders and a bunch of frogs crossing the road. And it's really hard to navigate. Once again, this is only after the first really warm, rainy spring night. And by warm, I mean warm, compared to winter. So like the end of March, beginning of April. And then maybe the next rainy spring night, they go back. So they're going from the woods to the pond. And then maybe the next rainy night, they're crossing the road in the opposite direction. But once again, you'll see, easily 100 of them and then go the rest of the year and not see one. All right. So, so this is a great time for spotted salamanders. And you know what? Forgive me, I made a video. I'm not sure if I put it here though. There's another one. I need to go out like this year because there's another cousin of that thing that I didn't get good video of. Oh, come on. Should be here somewhere. So here is another one of those big fat salamanders here. I took a picture of this last year. This is in our area, and this is the big fat ones. They're not doing well. Some of them are endangered. And this one is interesting because there's two salamanders which can mate, but they're different species. So notice this has one species, this has the other species, and they can produce these hybrid offspring, which then have their own name. So that's just one of those interesting things where even though they're different species, they can still kind of mate and produce these hybrid offspring. But the fact of the matter is these are really becoming rare. Amphibians in general are really sensitive to environmental issues. They have to breathe through their skin. All right. And so they're absorbing water, absorbing nutrients. So when we put salt on our roads, when there's chemical pollutants, that's going to affect them first. Acid rain certainly does. But just a host of things here, including there's a fungus which actually swims. There's a stage of the fungal life cycle where the cells have flagella and swim. They're called chytrids, and there are chytrids which are infecting these. So salamanders are suffering and depleting in numbers faster than any other group of vertebrates. And so we certainly want to watch them in our area. And these are hard to see. I haven't seen that many. This is from last year. I'm going to go out and try to get better, pictures and images. But once again, it would be like right around this time that would be your chance to see the Jefferson salamanders now. Yes.
I was curious about the species. Is the hybrid fertile?
It often varies, and this is it's really exciting, but then also gets hard to talk about. So, for example, horses and donkeys. They mate, they produce mules. Mules are sterile, or at least they are if the male parent was the horse and the female parent was the donkey. If the male parent was the donkey and the female was the horse, the offspring are actually fertile. So here's just what's going on here is you've got two groups which have become genetically different. Not so different that they can't mate at all, but different enough that when they mate, it doesn't work out as well as it normally does. So infertility is a common side effect of this, viability decreasing, common side effect, but it varies because it's just these genes, it's at random, they're becoming less and less like each other. So what happens when you compare these, it's kind of like all bets are off. So you might see them produce offspring, but not as much, or they might be sterile all the time, they might be sterile much of the time. And there's no one hard and fast rule because the separation of one population into two separate species, it's a gradual thing. And so you'd have to see like where are you in them becoming separate to see how well it would work out. But in any case, just big picture then. This is a great time of year. I mean, this is such a beautiful area. All right, there are always things that you can see when hiking in Orange County, even in the dead of winter. In fact, that's the time to see snow geese or rough-legged hawks, or the short-eared owls, etc. But if you wanted to go out hiking, say in the next month at some point, this is the time to see ducks. In fact, many ducks that you won't see at any other time of the year. And if it's a rainy night, especially the first warm rainy night, you'll see lots of salamanders. Now, I've been focusing on the big fat ones, but if you go out the first warm rainy night, you'll see a lot of these ones, the red-backed ones. They also like to migrate right at this time of year. And so this is actually on one of these nights. I'm by the Bashak filming the spotted salamanders, but here's a little guy who got a worm. That he's eating a redback, so I filmed him at the same time. So there's so much to enjoy. And especially like it strikes me in the summertime that, people, from the city, they've saved up so that they can rent a house or, kayak here or stay at the cabin or go to the camp, and we have this all around us. I certainly hope that you get a chance, to enjoy this great diversity, and especially if you know what to look for at a specific time of year. So ducks, and amphibians, this is a great time for them. If you were to say, I'd like to give another talk in April. So as you end April going into May, that is the time of the year to look for warblers. So, that would be in the, the woods and fields, et cetera, all these brightly colored birds, that's their time. But for right now, ducks, and amphibians, especially the salamanders. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Oh, sure.
I mean, quick one, just about that. Are the redbacks burrowers too?
Are they? Yes. Most.
I'm like inundated with those guys.
Yeah. So salamanders are all carnivorous. They all eat stuff. Most of them are eating, invertebrates, like, so worms if they're big enough, but like little aquatic things. And the majority of them are underground. There are exceptions to anything. So for example, the red Fs that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, when they're adults, they look like this and they live in the water. So they'll be eating water bugs and baby fish, these newts. When their young stop being aquatic, then they become the red Fs. So this is the juvenile phase. This is the adult phase. So there are exceptions, all right? Most salamanders are burrowing. In fact, there was a study, and like they actually measured it, but I think it's generally true. If you were to take an acre of woods, like kind of where we live, all right, so an acre of woods, and weigh all the birds and mammals, put them on a scale, and then get all the salamanders that live in that acre and put them on a scale, the salamander side is bigger. We just don't know it because they're nocturnal and they burrow. So there's salamanders all around us, a lot of them. Once again, if you were to weigh the vertebrates, near your house, salamanders quite likely are the biggest group. So yes, under leaves in the soil, then rotting logs, lots and lots of salamanders. So just there are a bunch of the skinny kind. So the red-backed one, they're one of the skinny kind. Here's another one I like a lot. It's called a slimy salamander, black with white dots in the skinny kind. The skinny kind, they all share a feature. They're called the lungless salamanders because they don't have lungs. They just do all of their breathing through their skin. And that's another thing I said that, amphibians, they have to keep their skin moist. And so, we humans, as we affect the environment with like chemicals or salt or whatever, these amphibians are going to be more vulnerable to that. Yes?
So that was you just showed slimy.
Yep.
Most of the spotted. These guys see it as well, but I was looking at them side by side.
So here's the slimy, and they're thin, and then they're much smaller. The spotted, right. And so actually I have a whole bunch of videos, and in some I do it by family, how the bigger fat ones. But let's go back to spotted. If I could just figure out where. So these instead of lots of little white dots, they would have larger yellow dots. And when this one is probably 3 times the size of the other one or more. This is really big compared to the other one. Like I said, we don't have many in this family. This one's hard to see. I see them only every couple of years or so. There's also one called a marbled salamander that's also in this big fat group. The family is called Ambistomidae. Once again, and here it is burrowing because that's what it would tend to do. Anybody else? Well,
I got one more.
Sure.
One more oddly specific question.
No.
So the eastern newts, when they're in that red stage, like that's like the dispersion stage.
Yes.
So they're trying to spread out as far as they possibly.
Also eat a lot. That's when they do a lot of their feeding.
I know that they hold around by the magnets and all that, but on some level they're just exploring that rather than finding places. Yes.
So one of the things Why don't we look at spotted salamander eggs? So this is just the spotted salamander eggs, which are going to get laid like in the next couple of weeks. They are also green because algae actually not only live inside the eggs, but actually live inside the cells of the salamander. So this female actually has algae living in her cells that she then puts in algae living inside the cells of the larvae, so that there's actually a little photosynthesis occurring in this vertebrate. Anyway, so that's super cool. But let me just kind of go to the eggs. Here's a problem. Parents want their kids to be successful. But if your kids are successful where you live, well, that's a problem because they're getting your food or your resources. And so, yes, one of the things that, species then have built into them is the idea that you're going to travel over here to lay your eggs and then go back over there. Or to some degree, as you said, one of the things, I don't know this for a fact, so I'm just going to tell you what I think. These salamanders, there was a bunch of them and they were all going the same way. You know how birds migrate? Well, I was at the Bashakil, and this was just easy to notice because, there's just a little bit of water over the asphalt. They were like migrating. They're all going in the same direction. You just see, these are all the newts, the parents of here. So it just seemed that just the way birds migrate or trout migrate, these guys, they had a goal. This is the time of year that even though they're in water, they're not just going to lay eggs in the water and say, hey, let's go back. They're like, no, we're going to migrate in this direction, lay our eggs, and then I don't know what happened to here. But once again, if all of your offspring were just in one area, that's a problem because now they're all competing with you. If you migrate to one place, lay your eggs here, and then you say, all right, now I'm going to go live over here. Now you're younger, successful there. So I think there is that, instinct as far as, I'm spreading out, so like this is where I lay my eggs, but I go over here in the woods for winter. But even here, like I think I saw, them migrating to some degree.
One more thought.
Sure.
One thing I found particularly interesting, I don't know if this is entirely accurate, but like the statement, that's a question.
Yeah.
So it's like the red S, as far as I understand it, I think it's staying in that middle stage for like I've heard something like 6 months.
Yep. Salamanders can be quite old, like a lot of these reptiles can. Yeah, like some of those spotted salamanders, they can be 10 years old, 8 years old.
Yeah, so the red S, when they go to that 45, like adults, like final form.
Yes.
It's like that's like a big, to me, there's always that's a big gap. Like one is choosing, not choosing, it's not the right word. One's turning into an adult after 6 months, turning into 11 years. I always thought it was odd because it seemed like it's almost like what are the conditions that they decide to meet for it to say, okay, now if I'm capable of becoming an adult in 6 months, why would I wait 2 years? And it's like, the conditions that they're deciding to meet seem, I'm not saying conscious of it, but it's like, it seems almost like they're choosing, okay, I found the spot where I'll become an adult now, or like, no, I'll wait another 6, I'll wait another whole year to find my spot where I'll become.
So one of the things that's both interesting, but also harder than explain is amphibians, they vary more how they reproduce than any other group. So if you want to say, oh, dogs lay eggs that develop in the tadpole, except for the ones where the tadpoles develop on the parent's back, or the parents swallow it into their stomach, or this, or as salamanders don't have internal fertilization, except for the couple who do, and they lay eggs in the water, except for most of them that don't. So just the whole reproduction thing varies, and specifically that species. How do newts reproduce? Most newts, before they become red Fs, look like this, a brief aquatic stage where they live in the water, hunt around. But some eggs get laid on land and just go straight to the red F stage. So that's a huge difference. So just first thing I want to say that there's variation in the population, like even whether they have an aquatic larval stage. What I think the answer to your question is, the adult phase, wherever, I'm sorry, I have to find my newt. Yeah. So there's two things that have to happen once you hatch. One, you have to eat a lot and get big enough so that you can lay eggs or make sperm. That's going to take energy. So you want to do that. You have to be successful, eat a lot or whatever. And then you have the phase where, okay, now it's time to reproduce. They start off really small. So how long it takes them before they say, hey, I'm ready to reproduce, might vary based on how much food they get or what their environment is. And so that if they're able to grow faster and reach a certain size, then they might say, hey, I'm good because if I'm, say, a female, I can produce this many eggs at this point, all right, because I'm this big. But if they're not there yet, well, then I can now see a scenario rather than become the aquatic adult where I'm going to be exposed to fish that might prey on me, and I'm going to lay a small number of eggs. Why don't I wait more time so that now I'll, be a larger individual with more nutrient reserves. I'll make more eggs, when I finally make that stage. So I can see something then, depending on that. Then you would probably get into regional variations, because if you're in Alabama, it didn't get that cold. So maybe they were able to stay active longer, eat more over the course of the year. If you're up in Maine, your feeding season might be smaller. So how many years it takes you to get to that adult, there just might be more eating days in Alabama than there are in Maine. So maybe that's the variable. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of things, going on. I mean, so they're wonderful. It's just, they're so varied. It's just fascinating, all the different, aspects of it. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I hope if you get a chance to go out, whether now or later in the summer, you really enjoy this great, environment that we lived in. And I'll give a couple more talks if there's anything that you're interested in. But other than that, good luck with your semesters and good luck hiking around.